these areas so that we can identify and note these areas. So healthy communication is affected, emotional safety is affected, one's spirituality is affected, and sometimes physical safety comes in play and is affected as well. Now, here it is that the classic example is given in the Bible of Isaac's family. The family members here were difficult around each other, but it took more sinister forms involving frequent parent-child conflicts, rivalry, emotional abuse, and or sibling abuse. So I'm just giving an example here. We will come back to Isaac and his family. There are a variety of reasons that a family can become dysfunctional, but everyone in the family unit is negatively impacted by this dysfunction. So I want for us to understand. So while it is that a dysfunctional family affects everybody, this can affect the unit negatively. But though it affects the unit negatively, an individual can seek to rise above the dysfunction that is happening. Now, the dysfunction particularly affects the children in the family because it negatively influences their understanding of healthy relationships and healthy families, which can result in children become emotionally neglected. This can ultimately lead to them growing up and having their own dysfunctional families. So while parents and children are there, sometimes the extended family might be an area that can be considered and is affected. The children, it is said, are those particularly affected. And because of that, these children, they can move on to their own homes, and their homes become dysfunctional homes or families as well. We continue to look at the definition, or rather, we will now share 5 symptoms of a dysfunctional home. Number 1, estrangement. And this is where family members who avoid other family members. So that's estrangement. So a symptom of a dysfunctional family. Number 2, anger. It may be expressed or repressed. So because of a home being dysfunctional, you will find that members of the home may become angry. They may express the anger while others may repress the anger. Number 3, lack of trust. This can be seen in faulty patterns of communication. Family members not trusting each other. Number 4, deception. And this is the inability to speak the truth to other family members. And then number 5, unhealthy secrecy. And this is refusal to face the truth. So an individual may see what is happening in his family between, family members, but refuse to face the truth. Let's look at some signs of a dysfunctional family. So dysfunctional families are caused by and are the responsibility of parents, because they are the ones that hold the power and authority within the family. While this can sometimes be due to toxic parenting, sometimes the cause is more complicated and nuanced. Toxic parenting means that it is harmful child care. So toxic parenting. So whatever the parents or parent is doing, it is considered to be harmful child care that is being given. So here it is that a sign of a dysfunctional family, the parents, it is said, are the main ones in the whole scheme of dysfunctional families. Why? Because they are the ones who hold power and authority. We continue as we look at several signs of a dysfunctional family. So let us list a few things here. Number one, addiction. Addiction is when a person struggles with alcohol or drug abuse. Addiction increases the chances of abuse, neglect, intimate partner violence, among other problematic interactions. Due to shame, stigma, functional impairment, or legal ratification, this can create an environment of secrecy to cover up for the addict, which in a core component, or rather is a core component of dysfunctional homes. So that's addiction. We go to number two, abuse. Abuse and neglect. Abuse can look like one person intentionally harming another person. And neglect is when a person fails to adequately meet the needs of someone in their care. So abuse and neglect. Number three, personality disorders. Personality disorders are severe and long-term mental health diagnosis that impact behavior and functioning. So this can be a sign also of a dysfunctional home. Emotional incest. Emotional incest. You might be wondering what this is. Now, emotional incest is when a parent heavily relies on a child for their emotional support. And I hope that is clear. So it is when a parent heavily relies on a child for their emotional support, which is too large of a burden for a child to bear. Toxic parenting. I did indicate what this is, harmful childcare, but then another author indicates that this includes unhealthy discipline, relational dynamics, and lack of clear parent-child boundaries. So that's toxic parenting. Also, there is high conflict home environment. So this includes frequent and intense arguments between parents or children, which may or may not include physical violence. And lastly, we have what is called emotional manipulation. Emotional manipulation is when one person sways another person's emotions in a way that only benefits the manipulator. And sometimes this is caused because of some guilt tricks that are being played in this whole scheme of emotional manipulation. So just to share a few of the signs of a dysfunctional family. Now we look at roles in a dysfunctional home. It says here that families operate like a system or a machine. How is this so? This means that each family member plays a specific role that keeps the machine running. So if you look at a machine, there are various parts of a machine that keeps that machine running. So what this is saying is that family members would be like the various parts of a machine that keeps the machine running. Now, all of the roles have their own script to follow, and people adhering to these roles end up continuing the dysfunctional patterns. And this is what Keisha Covington says in her book, Secrets of a Dysfunctional Family. But let's look at some of these roles. So here are the most common roles that people can fall into in a dysfunctional home. Number one, the scapegoat. The scapegoat. What does this mean? This means the person in the scapegoat role is the identified problem and is usually blamed for all the family's issues, whether they are actually the problem or not. This role is typically, although not always, held by one of the children, the scapegoat. So the blame is placed on somebody, just like Adam and Eve. When Eve was deceived and Eve went to her husband and Adam ate, and then the blame game started. That's the scapegoat. Number two, all right, something is happening to my PowerPoint. All right, so number two, the hero. This person is functioning enough that the family uses them to convince themselves there is no issue within the family. So that's a hero. This person justifies the presence of the scapegoat and carries the burden of presenting the facade of the family being functional. So that's a hero. So this person apparently is fooling himself or herself that all is well. Number three, the mascot. This person plays the role of emotional referee by stepping in with humor and positivity to diffuse or distract from serious issues. Another way to put it, this person would sweep things under the carpet. They wouldn't deal with the problems, but they will come in with their various humor and positivity just to diffuse or to look past the challenges that are there. Number four, role number four, you have the caretaker. The caretaker, this individual attempts to keep everyone in the family as calm and happy as possible, even if it covers up deeper issues and dysfunction. While this helps the family to operate on a daily basis, it ends up preventing the family from healing and functioning in a healthier way. So that's the caretaker. Number five, the lost child. The lost child. Now, this family member tries to blend into the background in order to avoid being involved in or creating conflict. This person is usually more of a loner and usually struggles with self-esteem. So that's the lost child. And then we have number six, the golden child. So the golden child, this is the child that the parent or parents project all of their positive qualities onto or into, which often makes this child the favorite. This child also adopts and lives out the parents' moral codes. And we will see this as we move on to a few slides, as we will come to them, as we look at Isaac and his two sons. So these are the roles that you will find that are common that people fall into the dysfunctional home. Let's now look at some of the effects or impacts of growing up in a dysfunctional home. So since the family is where a person learns to understand themselves, the world, and interactions with other people, growing up in a dysfunctional family can negatively impact all aspects of a person's life. And we did say this before, but I want to reiterate it for emphasis. So growing up in a dysfunctional family can negatively impact all aspects of a person's life. I want you to know the choice of words, because the choice of words allows us to understand that while it is that you grow up in a negative or a dysfunctional home, the negativity doesn't necessarily have to impact your life in all aspects. It may impact your life in some aspects, but you can pull through, right? So here it is that these impacts, they impact a person's sense of self. It can create a warped sense of how relationships are supposed to look and can make it difficult to function in normal daily activities. That's what the dysfunctional home can do to an individual. It can impact you in such a way. So you are affected in terms of your self-esteem. You're affected in terms of your relationships, not only in your family, but whether it is that you go to school, you go to work, you go to church, it can impact you. And your normal daily activities, it can make those activities become very, very problematic. So we continue. Growing up in a dysfunctional home can have consequences like a disrupted sense of trust in yourself, in others, in the world. And we mentioned that before. Difficulty dating and forming healthy relationships. We talked about anger. So a person can become so angry because of their home, the dysfunctional home, that they bring it into their dating arena. And as a result, that can be played out and become very, very difficult for dating relationships. Also, you can see increased risk of alcohol and drug abuse, increased risk for psychiatric disorders such as anxiety, panic, depression, among others. And recently, I was counseling a young couple, and only to discover that the female in the relationship, at an early stage in her life, she was molested. She lived in a very dysfunctional home, but during the counseling session, there were some things that came forth that the male felt very uncomfortably about. And because of that, the dysfunctionality and the effects of such on this young lady was brought into their courtship. And as a result, the counseling stopped, the relationship broke off, and both persons went their separate ways. So indeed, you can have increased risk for psychiatric disorders such as anxiety, panic, depression, among many other things. We look at a few more in terms of growing up in a dysfunctional home, that it can have consequences, and these are additional consequences: low self-esteem, difficulty in maintaining employment, struggling to set and hold boundaries, feeling uncomfortable, experiencing and managing emotions, increased risk of having their own dysfunctional home in the future. So persons may even think about that for the future and really consider how it is that they are going to manage in the future. Now, I want to bring us to more of a hands-on experience or scenario that we can familiarize ourselves with as I seek to get a little bit more in this presentation. So dysfunctional families are new. When we turn to the pages of Holy Scripture, we don't have to look very far to find dysfunctional family relationships. Let us highlight a few of them. Consider the first family, Adam and Eve, who blamed each other for their own disobedience. Then you can consider their children. Cain murdered his brother Abel. Also, we can consider Noah's three sons. Ham, in particular, disgraced his father by uncovering his nakedness. And these are some dysfunctional families. Also, there is Abraham and Sarah. Now, Abraham, he lied about his wife, calling her his sister. His nephew Lot turned out to be a major disappointment as well, a dysfunctional family. Then we can consider David. Although he was a great king, a great warrior, and a great poet, as a father and husband, he was a failure. His marriage to Michal was largely a failure His marriage to Bathsheba was based on an adulterous affair, and his son Absalom turned against him. As his kingdom crumbled, so did his family. But we know the end result of David. So even though one may grow up in a dysfunctional home, that person can come out victorious. So here it is that we can consider 3 generations of family dysfunction in light of Isaac with his 2 sons, Jacob and Esau. So this is another example that we can consider in terms of family dysfunction. Now, to understand Isaac's family dysfunction with his 2 sons, Jacob and Esau, we would have to look 2 generations before. So to understand a little bit more as to what's happening in this scenario. Now, the dysfunction begins when Sarah is unable to conceive, so Abraham sleeps with Hagar, Sarah's maidservant. When Abraham goes into Hagar, a son is created whose name is Ishmael. The resulting relationship causes so much strain between Sarah and Hagar that Hagar runs away. What are we looking at? We are looking at the impact of a dysfunctional family on one's spiritual development. So at length, Hagar returns, gives birth to Ishmael, and a tenuous peace is restored until Sarah gives birth to Isaac, at which point Abraham, in response to Sarah's complaint, sends Hagar and Ishmael away for good. What's going on here? Not only do Sarah and Hagar not get along, neither do Ishmael and Isaac get along. Family dysfunction. And we see where it all started, from the parents. So we pass now to the 2nd generation. Isaac marries Rebekah, and after 20 years, she gives birth to Jacob and Esau. But the boys are very different. And Isaac prefers Esau while Rebekah loves Jacob. Now, here it is that we are getting into the entire mix of the dysfunction of this family. So for starter, we see where the parents have preference in terms of the sons, favorites. Here it is that this family, favoritism is not hidden to the 2 boys, who become rivals, not allies. So yes, parents can have favorites, but parents ought to keep that as a secret. Children ought not to know that. But here it is that these parents, Isaac and his wife, allowed for the children to know this. So as a result, the children know they are rivals, they are not allies, they are not working together. So while sibling rivalry is a fact of life, even in the best of families, in dysfunctional families, the rivalry becomes the defining fact of family life. That's what happens with Jacob and Esau. Because of their vast, different personalities, and because of parental favoritism, they are destined to be rivals and sometimes bitter enemies as long as they live. And this is cause for concern. Now let's look at Genesis chapter 27. The 3 generations of family dysfunction are about to come to a fearful climax in Genesis chapter 27. There are 4 characters in the story, and I just named them: Isaac the father, Rebekah the mother, Esau the firstborn, and Jacob the secondborn. What you are seeing at the beginning of this chapter, chapter 27 of Genesis, is a family that, while not working very well, at least is staying together. And that's what happens with dysfunctional families sometimes. They know the family is not working well, but they stay together. For what reason? They stay together. By the end of the chapter, The family has been blown apart once and for all. And you will see that coming out as well. We continue to look at Genesis 27. Note these two facts about these four characters. Number one, all four are presented in a negative light in this chapter. So when you look at Genesis chapter 27, none of the characters are looked at in a positive light. Number two, these four people never appear together at the same time. Wow. So it appears as though they don't eat together, they don't play together, they don't gather together for any reason. Furthermore, Jacob and Esau are now so far separated in their relationship that they never appear together at all. This is a portrait of a dysfunctional family hanging by a thread that self-destructs because of sinful patterns of interpersonal deception that have never been confronted and resolved. So these individuals, they don't confront and they don't resolve their problems. So what do you find? Their problems end up becoming widespread. And here it is that while it is that these individuals, they go through all of this, I can tell you, brothers and sisters, it affected their spiritual development in so many ways. So many ways. We continue. So let's now look at 3 impacts of Isaac's dysfunctional home on spiritual development. So we look at 3. Number 1, disobedience. And we can see this in Genesis 27, 1-4. So Isaac, his intentions are clear from the very beginning. What's his intention? Isaac still wants Esau to have the rights of the firstborn after he's dead. So he wants Esau to have the rights of the firstborn. He wants that. And there is nothing wrong with that. But the story gets a little deeper. God had already spoken and declared before the boys were born that the older will serve the younger. The older will serve the younger. So here it is that throughout all years, Isaac had evidently never been willing to accept God's choice of Jacob over Esau. This is disobedience. So now at last, he plans to give Esau the blessing in deliberate defiance of God's will. So God declared something. Isaac knows about it, but he intends to go another route. So here it is that with this family, we can identify an impact of a dysfunctional home on spiritual development, disobedience. So Isaac was pretty much disobedient. Let's go a little further with impact number 1. So in doing this, in light of what Isaac wanted for his son Esau, Isaac is making 4 mistakes. 1, he is clearly trying to overturn what God has said. 2, he is ruled completely by his senses and not so much godly principles. Number 3, he ignores the fact that Esau is spiritually unqualified for the blessing. And number 4, he conspires in secret with Esau to hide his plan from Rebekah and Jacob. So you see what a dysfunctional family can do between family members? They can keep secrets. They can plan and scheme things against each other. And this, my friends, is very, very dangerous. Let's go to number 2. Deception. Genesis 27, 5 to 29. The plan of Isaac didn't work out because Rebekah was secretly listening to Isaac and Esau. More deception, more secrecy. So now you can understand the complication that goes with dysfunctional homes. So here it is. Isaac is talking with his son Esau. Rebekah is listening in. Now, who does that in a family? There must be a challenge if persons are doing this in a family. She then repeats to Jacob what she overheard, and then she cooks up a scheme of her own. Still more deception, more secrecy. So on both sides, you are finding deception, you are finding secrecy. So Rebekah's plan is simple. Jacob is going to kill 2 choice goats, and Rebekah will cook up a tasty meal for Isaac. Jacob will serve it to his father while pretending to be his brother, thus tricking Isaac into giving him the blessing. We continue with impact number 2, deception. And it gets a little deeper, which I consider to be the dirty deed. So here it is that we can note many ways that Jacob deceives his father. Look at the dirty deeds. Number 1, deliberate deception. He goes to his father and he says, "That's Jacob, I am Esau, your firstborn." That's not right. And that cannot be right. Number 2, blasphemy. The Lord your God gave me success. So now he is calling wrongly on the Lord's name. Number 3, repeated deception. "Are you really my son Esau?" "I am," he replied. So in a dysfunctional home with deception, which impacts one's spiritual development, what you will find sometimes is that it will repeat, it will continue on and on and on. Because once you tell a lie, you will have to tell another lie to back up the first lie, and then lies upon lies to back up each lie that you tell. Number 4, dishonest intimacy. So he went to him and kissed him. Jacob went to his father and kissed his father. Dishonest intimacy. And a dysfunctional home indeed can really have dishonest intimacy. Sometimes the husband may go to bed with his wife, he fakes it, or the wife may go to bed with her husband and she fakes it, right? Dishonest intimacy. You pretend to be in it, but you're not in it. Number 5, misleading detail. Isaac caught the smell of his clothes, of Jacob's clothes, but Jacob dismissed it, by misleading details. Now, on another note, in this scenario, who is deceiving whom? On one hand, Jacob is definitely deceiving his father Isaac. However, Isaac, because he thinks Jacob is really Esau, thinks he's deceiving Jacob by giving the blessing to Esau. Both intend to deceive the other, only Jacob succeeds. What a dysfunctional family. And what a typical example of how a dysfunctional family operates. Now, this should not be a surprise for us. This is what happens whenever you set off on the path of deception. This follows whenever you say, "It doesn't matter how we do it." Jacob's lies are bound to happen because he decided that the end justifies the means. Soon one lie leads to another, then another, and finally, you have to keep on lying to cover up your previous lies. And I said that before. We continue with the third and last impact of a dysfunctional home on the spiritual development of an individual. Disintegration. Genesis 27:32, chapter 28, verse 9. Verse 41 of Genesis 27 informs us that Esau held a grudge against Jacob. He even said to himself, after my father dies, I'm going to kill my brother Jacob. All of that is understandable. Who can blame Esau for being angry? His brother has cheated him twice. Now understand this, brothers and sisters. Here it is that Esau was cheated twice. Now anger sets in. And because anger sets in, he has a mind frame of killing his brother. You see what anger can do? You see what a dysfunctional family can lead to? So right here, you are now seeing a greater development of disintegration in the family. Now, at this point, Rebecca steps back into the picture. She tells Jacob to run for his life because Esau will surely kill him. She advises him to visit his uncle, her brother Laban in Haran, about 500 miles away. Eventually, Esau's anger would cool and Rebecca would, according to her plan, send a message for Jacob to come back. But after 20 years, Jacob would not have returned. So Rebecca seemed to have known her boys to know that after some years, Esau would cool off and Jacob could return. So it seemed all of that was in the plan. We continue with impact number 3. One final detail and our story is over. Rebecca has to find a way to justify sending Jacob to Haran. So she tells Isaac that she wants Jacob to find a wife from among their own people and not from among pagan Hittites. In effect, she's giving Isaac a cover story. Isaac agrees, calling Jacob to his side, repeating the Abrahamic blessing, and sending him off to Haran to find a wife. More deception. So what do you have when you stand back and take this story as a whole? What you have is a dysfunctional family that in the beginning is barely holding together. In the end, the family collapses under the weight of deception and dishonesty. And so the family now disintegrates. How to deal with a dysfunctional family? Remember that you are one member within your family who was playing a certain role because, or rather before, you were aware of it. You can now choose to disengage from that role, which will impact everyone in the family, hopefully in a positive way. So when you look at Genesis 32, 9 to 12, you will find that Jacob reached a point in his life where he recognized what was happening to him and to his family, that he prayed to God. And when he prayed to God, he asked God to seek to help him. And that help that he requested would have gone a far way with him. Let me identify a verse here for you. So this is Genesis chapter 32 and verse 10. Let me read verse 10. Let me read verse 9. And Jacob said, O God, my father, Abraham, and God said, and Jacob said, O God of my father Abraham, and God of my father Isaac, the Lord which said unto me, return unto thy country and to thy kindred, and I will dwell with thee. Verse 10, I am not worthy of the least of all the mercies and of all the truth which thou hast showed unto thy servant. For with my staff I passed over this Jordan, and now I am become 2 bands. So here it is that Jacob was expressing that he understands himself, understands his family, and he's seeking a way out. He's seeking a way out. So the impact impacted everyone in his family. And it impacted in a negative way. But here it is in Genesis chapter 33. Jacob now wants something positive out of what has been happening. So focus on how to direct. So in a dysfunctional home, we must focus on how to direct all our individual relationships with family members to being more healthy relationships. And I think this is what Jacob wanted to do, including focusing on good communication, having fun shared experiences, and being authentic with each other. And you will find a little later in the story, Jacob had a good communication with Laban. He had good communication with Rachel. And even when he was going back to Rebekah and to Esau, he communicated that as well. So Jacob's life was being changed little by little. Well, let's continue. Once you recognize that you're in a dysfunctional home, it's critical to make sure you're taking care of your own emotional needs. It's important to remember that while you are doing introspective work, your family might not be doing that same work and may stay oblivious to the patterns you now cannot unsee. When you're noticing yourself getting emotionally dysregulated by different interactions, set a healthy boundary or use that situation to inform yourself of the boundaries that you need to set in the future. Very, very important, very, very crucial. Now, how to break the cycle? The first step in breaking the cycle is to educate yourself on the signs and roles to look out for in dysfunctional families. Genesis 32, 9 to 12. I stated that before, the prayer of forgiveness that Jacob prayed. Now, the second step is holding yourself accountable to showing up differently than your parents and family. Genesis 32, 13 to 23. Now, Jacob was willing to make amends with his brother Esau. And so what did he do? Jacob held himself accountable for all that happened. And he now decided that he's going to communicate with his brother. Irrespective of what would come out of the situation, Jacob decided he's going to communicate with his brother Esau. He's going to go back home and he's going to seek forgiveness, irrespective of whatever happened. Number two, knowing the signs and being completely honest with yourself when you're seeing them. Very, very important also. So one should be able to identify the signs. And when identifying the signs, be honest with yourself and recognize that you are seeing them. When that happens, hold yourself accountable to addressing them when and if they come up and are critical pieces in ensuring that you don't end up making your own family dysfunctional. And that's what Jacob would have done according to Genesis chapter 33 and verse 2. Let me quickly read that one. I know my time is out and I'm almost done. So verse 2 of Genesis 33 says, and he put the handmaids and their children foremost, and Leah and her children after, and Rachel and Joseph hindermost. So what we are finding here is that Jacob is learning to recognize his situation and seek to address them accordingly. At the beginning, Jacob did not put Esau at the front when he took his birthright. But here it is in Genesis 32, 33 rather 2, he is putting his family behind him and he's going forward. And this is an improvement in his spiritual development. So he moved from a deceiver, to one who seeks to be putting his family first. Great development. And this is from the angle of what it is that Jacob would have been doing and how it is that God would have been transforming his life. It can be difficult to realize that you have grown up in a dysfunctional family or that you are currently in one now. Remember that this cycle of dysfunction can be broken by becoming aware of the problem, working to address the dysfunction with professional help, and by taking time to heal. So while it is that one's home may be affected by dysfunction, you don't have to remain dysfunctional in that dysfunctional home, but you can break the cycle. You can break the cycle. All you need to do, identify the problems and seek to work out. And if it is that you need to seek professional help, seek professional help and take the time you need to heal. Jacob, when he ran away, I believe that was his time that he was taking to heal, and he was being healed by God. And as a result, we would have seen how that healing was now being played out in how he related to Esau going back and how he related even in his own family with his 12 boys and girls, even though the girls are not mentioned in a greater way. But we see that though he was coping and learning, he was failing by the way, but he was moving on from one spiritual development to another. And that is the end of the presentation. Thank you so much for listening in. I will now turn over to Pastor Dr. Phillips as he will take